Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in the San Gabriel Valley today, and we are joined by the president of the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water Board. His name is Thomas Wong. I'd like to speak with you about water, sir. And if we were talking maybe 6 months ago, we were very excited because we saw an El Nino was just a month or two out. And here in Southern California, not so much. El Nino became El Nono.
Yeah.
Northern California got a lot of rain, but not us.
Yeah, no, I remember being on this show
Right.
talking to you, and we were cautiously optimistic about
Right.
potentially a lot of rain coming down and what kind of impacts in terms of flooding might happen instead. But yeah, nothing really happened here in Southern California.
So let me ask you then, since Northern California did get a lot of rain, does that benefit Southern California? Is California as a state still in drought?
It does benefit Southern California in that we do get some water from Northern California, and my district especially gets all of its water from Northern California. And
From the Sierra Nevadas?
From the Sierra Nevada, the Sacramento, San Joaquin Bay
Got
Delta.
it. Okay.
And we import that water for our cities to use here locally. So it does help, but honestly, Northern California really only saw an average year. It wasn't above
Right.
average.
But which is, I mean, I know it was only average, but thank God it was average
Yeah.
because if you look at Shasta and Oroville, those are our major dams. They're at 90% capacity, whereas last year they were, I think, in the 20s maybe.
Yeah. So it was welcome relief, but it doesn't look like it's going to rain very much this fall and winter.
Yeah.
And
Do we have
don't know how
do we
long
know
it'll
yet?
last.
Do we know? What are the projections?
Well, people are saying that, well, now they're predicting La Nina, which would be traditionally more dry kind of conditions. So we'll see what comes. We never know. But it doesn't look like, I mean, no one's predicting it's going to rain. So
Sure.
we have to be vigilant and make sure we're redoubling our efforts in terms of pushing water conservation.
So let's talk about conservation though, because as a result of the storms that were frequent in Northern California, there were several cities, counties, water districts really complaining to the governor who had imposed mandatory water restrictions, that those restrictions should be lifted because they had plenty of water. Whereas here in Southern California, we didn't. Ultimately, the governor did relax those restrictions. Water boards are now allowed to relax, even drop mandatory targets. There still are some bans on wasteful water practices. There were orders to develop new efficiency standards for water to decrease urban use. But those standards, I think, are gone, the mandatory standards?
So the state has kept some of those mandatory restrictions, not letting
Right.
water kind of run onto your sidewalk and things like that, but relax its conservation cutback targets for a lot of the cities and water utilities, and allowed cities and utilities to determine for themselves what their water conditions might be going forward. So for some Northern California areas, it makes sense. They got more rain, they've got more storage. They're going to be okay. They maybe don't need to conserve as much. But a lot of cities in the Central Valley, Southern California, lots of areas, communities, didn't have that. And we're seeing them relax some of their restrictions, which concerns me and a lot of water planners.
What about
as
your
well.
cities, which are San Gabriel?
Monterey Park, Alhambra, Sierra Madre, and Azusa. From what I remember, all of them have relaxed, reported lower numbers in terms of conservation targets. They're all in different kind of water situations as well, and they have unique kind of situations. But they've all, from what I understand, reduced their cutback target from what it was under the mandatory standards to a little bit lower, to a lot lower in some cases. And we're hoping, and we're meeting with our cities to make sure they continue to push water conservation. But there's also, and there was an article today, I think in the SAC-B,
Sure.
that talked about one of the pressures for the state relaxing its mandatory restrictions and the cutback targets was because a lot of water districts were having problem meeting their revenue projections.
Right, and
making
let's
money.
explain that because it's a kind of an interesting dichotomy. If people are using less water, what does that mean?
It means the water districts and water utilities are not making as much money to pay for the things they need to pay for,
Because
infrastructure and pipe replacement.
People's water bills are going to drop. But
Yeah.
yet, as I understand it, sir, and please explain, certain fixed costs don't change just because less water is being used.
Yeah, you still have to pay, whether one drop of water goes through a pipe or if there's constant water flowing
Right.
through, you still have to pay for the pipe, the maintenance of the pipe. and replacing of that pipe. We have a lot of aging infrastructure that's 60, 70, 80 years old that needs to be
And
replaced.
what caused tremendous frustration for many Californians is we are now seeing requests from water agencies to increase water bills. And there's like a cognitive dissonance. Wait a second, I'm using less water, so why are you increasing my bills?
Yeah.
But it's because of what you've described.
Yeah, and it's something water districts and water utilities need to do a better job of helping explain and engage the community on.
I hear you with regard to better explaining, but is there something perverse about the system that less water use equals we need to increase our rates? That doesn't, just intuitively, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, no, and I think there needs to be change in terms of how we structure our rates going forward to make sure that fixed costs are paid maybe by a fixed price.
I see what you're saying.
And
right.
then variable costs towards the use of water and the cost of actual water that comes through our pipes can
What
be a variable
about
cost.
those that use an exorbitant amount of water? You surely know there was a decision recently, maybe a year ago, out of San Juan Capistrano, which precluded water utilities from charging, I guess, above and beyond what the actual cost is,
Yeah.
even for scofflaws that are using too much water. I guess that decision's still kind of percolating through the system, but
Yeah, so, but that decision actually, the judge, from what I understand, really didn't say you can't use tiered pricing
Right.
or other kind of rate structures. You just have to have the documentation to do it, and they were a little bit sloppy in their
Okay.
kind of homework. And so you can, but it's just a little more complicated to do it. It'll cost a little bit more to put the rate structure together and do the rate studies. But you're seeing a lot of districts start to be a lot more innovative in how they charge their customers for water use and making sure that they can pay their bills and maintain their water systems.
what do you think about shaming?
I have no problem with it.
And let's explain that. I mean, what shaming is letting neighbors know that there are people in their midst that are wasteful water users. For example, Amy Poehler, who I think is one of the funniest actresses around, she got shamed by Beverly Hills because she was using too much water.
Yeah, no, I think it's there's a fine line obviously to draw between kind of people's private usage and
Right.
that kind of information that we should probably keep private. But in this day and age, the reality is we don't have enough water. We can't continue to use water at the rate that we have been. We have to be more efficient, and whatever opportunities we have to kind of help change the culture and change people's attitudes, help people understand better that they can and should be using water more efficiently, including putting people's names out there a little bit to encourage them to cut back on their water use. I think that's totally fair game.
So will we see that at the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District?
So you won't see that at my district because
because-
we don't sell directly. We're not a retail
Of
agency,
course.
so we actually don't know people's individual usage.
So the retail agencies would be?
Our city water utilities, some of the
Right.
private water companies that actually bill people directly.
I'm wondering, and I want to ask you this kind of as an expert in water and what you see personally. You know, we had a big drought in the 70s, and I remember the expression, if it's yellow, let it mellow. And, you know, I got a sense that after that drought ended, we didn't really change our water practices, maybe a little bit. Do you feel as if with this drought, we are now in a place where we are changing our water practices? Because from what I've learned, we have to.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some changes, whether they're short-term or long-term, real permanent changes. We'll see, and we'll see especially as kind of these relaxed conservation standards take effect. If people continue to save at the rates they have been, even though
Right.
enforcement's kind of relaxed a little bit. I'm hopeful, but hopefully the state and other water agencies can continue the messaging in a consistent and effective way.
Okay. His name is Thomas Wong. He is the president of the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, which serves significant portions of the beautiful San Gabriel Valley. My name is Brad Pomerance, and we're so glad you're joining us, even though I have a head cold on Charter Local Edition.